He'll never have to come again.
We'll not find it on YouTube. Right, okay. We've walked around onto Peveril Point. You can now see the shales a lot clearer. Okay, they tend to be interbedded with some clay material. Then you get the hard shale. Then you get a little bit of a softer layer, and you can see the hard layers actually sticking out. Okay, so that's the shale. In the distance, we've got the chalk outcrop of Ballard Point. Okay, going out to Old Harry, which is one of the stacks out there. Alright, now this is Swanage. Hey? This is Ballard Point going out towards Old Harry, the stack out there. This side of it is Swanage Bay. And this chalk ridge runs all the way through, okay, down the south coast. Where do we cross that chalk ridge to get into Swanage? Any ideas? Where did we come through that chalk ridge to get into Swanage? Paulsgrove. Paulsgrove. This chalk ridge is not the Paulsgrove chalk ridge. Good point, but we'll talk about that in a minute. When we came down on the coach, anyone notice anything?
We were asleep.
The last few miles. Something fairly derelict on a mound.
Corfe Castle.
Corfe Castle, yeah. Okay, so where we come through the chalk ridge is at Corfe Castle. There's a natural hollow there. There's a river that runs through Corfe. It must have eroded the chalk ridge down, forming a natural entrance. Now this area, this side of the chalk ridge is known as the Isle of Purbeck. The Isle of Purbeck, Purbeck stone, Portland stone, it's all the same stuff. The Isle of Purbeck is actually a peninsula. Now a peninsula is like Cornwall, you've got water on three sides. Okay, so here we've got water over there, Silston Point, we've got water around this side, that's two sides. Where's the third side? Well, it's not the other side of the chalk ridge, because that then goes into
Bournemouth?
No, what's the place?
Christchurch?
No, this side of the... Who's local? What's this side of... Studland, thank you. Studland Bay. Okay, so again, we haven't got water that side. However, go back 200-300 years, and you did. That was all marshland. Studland Bay and the sands at Studland was all marshland. And so it was wet that side, all the way up to Wareham, where we turned off the main road to come down towards Swanage. So locally it became known as the Isle of Purbeck. And it was a bit of a smuggler's paradise. You can see there's lots of little coves to get boats in. Bigger boat coming offshore could unload some smuggled goods onto smaller boats, and they could be smuggled into the country. And you wouldn't have to pay tax and excise, brandy, well not whiskey but brandy, tea, those sorts of goods were very expensive, and if you could smuggle them in, they were worth a lot of money. And it became a bit of a lawless area, the Isle of Purbeck, and hence why we had the castle built at Corfe Castle. You control what goes in and out. The one point where people have got to go through, because it's either pick up your smuggled goods and walk across the chalk ridge, and it's steep, that's not easy, or you go through that entrance at Corfe Castle. And so that's why the castle was built there. But as I said, during the Civil War of the 1600s, when Cromwell came, this was a bit of a royalist area, and when Cromwell got on the throne, he had the castle blown up, which is why it's a ruin today. And we think most of Corfe, the village itself, is built of the rubble that came out of the castle. Anyway, as I said, a bit of a lawless area. Swanage Bay, Old Harry is named after a pirate in the 1800s. He used to sit round here, the other side of Ballard Cliff, this side in Swanage Bay. Then his pirate ship, as the merchant ships came out of Poole Harbour, okay, the wealthy merchant ships came out, he'd pounce on them, take their goods and sell them. So as a pirate. So he's named after a pirate. The stack. It used to be his wife there. Yeah, we're going to talk about his wife as well. It used to be Old Harry and his wife. Used to be the two stacks. But his wife got a bit too decrepit and fell over into the sea one day. Okay, so that's recent times, about 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. So Old Harry's wife's had it. She's actually had it. But Old Harry was actually a pirate, and he did raid the merchant ships coming out of Port Harbour. But anyway, Swanage Bay, Swanage Harbour itself is quiet. It's calm, it's protected from the storms from the southwest, so it's a good haven. And now, in recent years, it's been turned into a tourist resort. Victorians came along, built the railway to Swanage, thought great place to come to the seaside. They liked their seaside resorts as they did on the Isle of Wight, and they built up Swanage into quite a popular seaside resort. And then along came Dr. Beeching in the 1960s. British Railways at the time was in a huge mess, very, very extensive throughout the country. A third more lines than there are today, 30% bigger than it is today. Okay, so it shows you how many lines were actually closed down. And Dr. Beeching was given the task of updating and modernising and making a report of what to do about British Railways, because basically the infrastructure was so old it was falling apart, and the government needed to pump money in to bring it back into a modern state and a modern society. A lot of the wagons were about to fall apart, they were dangerous, didn't have brakes on them, that sort of thing was going on. So Dr. Beeching undertook a review of British Railways, and whether you like it or not, closed 30% of the railways in the UK. And one of them that was earmarked for closure was this branch line from Wareham to Swanage. Too costly to keep open. You've got old wagons doing the goods runs. Cheaper to say, drop the goods at Wareham, local lorries would deliver it into Swanage. And that happened to a lot of these branch lines. Anyway, Swanage Railway completely taken up. By the 1970s, nothing left of the track bed. Okay, the station in the town had all been demolished, and it was about to be made into a car park for a big supermarket. When, just at the last moment, a group of volunteers approached Swanage Town Council and said, can we buy the track bed and run it as a privatised railway? Today, it's now one of the biggest, popular, most heritage railways in the country. Very popular in the summer. The station, you wouldn't even realise had been completely demolished. It's all been completely rebuilt as it was in its heyday. And it's a very popular, becoming a very popular tourist resort for a week or so in the summer, or for a day trip or whatever. Okay, so a lot goes on. So tourism's picked it back up, and because of that, Swanage Town Council has ploughed a lot of money into Swanage itself. We'll see that this afternoon. Okay, what we're going to do this afternoon is we're going to, where you've got that white van coming down off that road, coming down the slope, just there, if we can meet at the end of lunch. I'll give you a time to meet in a moment. Okay, so right at the other end of the promenade, we'll just meet there. You can go onto the beach, it's fine. All right, so as where the road bends and turns away to go uphill, you come off and we'll meet down there. We're going to walk along and look at the rocks that side of Swanage Bay this afternoon. We're not going to go all the way to the chalk, it's a long, long way to go to the chalk. Coming back from the chalk, well, if you went the other side, it gets younger. We've seen everything the other side, the Reading Beds, the London Clay, the sands of Bracklesham Beds and all those. That's what you get in Studland Bay. We've seen all that, we've seen what's older. So we're getting older. As you come from the chalk, you're getting older until you get to the Jurassic. Cretaceous, 60 to 80 million years old. Jurassic, 120 million years old. Okay, quick word about the chalk. The chalk is a big ridge. It runs all the way across to the Needles on the Isle of Wight. That chalk ridge snakes its way down the Isle of Wight and comes out of Whitecliffe Bay, where you first started off your geology last semester. Okay, some of you probably in the rain. All right, so Whitecliffe Bay, all the way back across the island to the Needles and all the way. So this chalk ridge runs a long, long way. You don't happen to know where it goes, do you? No. That way. Yeah, well, we don't. We'll have to find it out. I'll have to look on the map and find out where it goes.
Maps, we have this.
But more importantly, 4,000 years ago, that chalk ridge was intact across there. 4,000 years ago, it was breached by the sea. The sea got through a week apart and flooded the river system behind it, which was the Solent. So we're at the entrance to the Solent here and formed the Solent as it is today. But before that, all the rivers were draining into this big estuarine river, which was known as the Solent, and it was a completely different system. So it's very, very recent times that that chalk ridge has been exposed, and some days you can see you can see waves breaking on the chalk ridge just beneath the surface. It's quite shallow in places. Okay, it has to be dredged to allow some of the bigger ships out, the ferries and so out of Poole Harbour. If you went back and goes onto the seabed, you can find Roman quarries, so it's still going back. Okay, so it's like that in terms of time. Very, very quickly, that has just happened as far as geological times have occurred. While we're here, Steve, do you want to have a quick word about the cliff itself? Because you can see some things in the cliff, can't we?
Yeah, I don't know if you have a look at the beginning of the chalk there. So this is probably the lower chalk. Just before that, it's a series of these kind of more clayey soil beds, yeah? So you've got a sequence, as Dr. Watson said, going up through the Cretaceous. You've got the Wealden beds to begin with, then the Apathyll clay. But just as you get to the chalk itself, there's the gaults. I don't know if everyone remembers the blue slipper maybe mentioned on the Isle of Wight. A very slip-slidey, clayey clay. All the wrong terms there, but a clayey clay, which sits just underneath the chalk there. And what happened back in around 2000, I think it was, about 9-10 years ago, is that the gault itself actually had a rotational slip. And what happened was that when people came out onto the shore, they actually saw the gault protruding up from the seabed. Very close to the kind of shore, the gault was protruding, and what happened, there was a rotational slip that brought down the chalk on top. So you had a fairly competent rock, okay, fairly soft, but fairly competent, that had failed through the loss of support from the clay underneath. And you can still see the actual slip there. Everyone see kind of an upside down W. The thing with chalk is that the whiter, or the brighter it is, okay, the more white it is, the more recent a fall's taken place. It's when it goes mossy and green that it's fairly stable. But you can still see an upside down kind of W there, which is an indication that's been a fairly recent, say 9-10 years ago, fall. So the clay slip, rotational failure underneath, bringing down the chalk on top. Somebody mentioned Paulsgrove earlier, didn't they? Everyone remember we looked at the back in the first year, Paulsgrove chalk there? That's of a different, this has all been folded, yeah? Everyone know about folds and all that? So we're not actually on the same ridge as such as Paulsgrove. What's happened is that the chalk's been folded, it goes back down and then comes back up again in the fold that you see at Paulsgrove there. So you've got a series of what they call on echelon folds going across the south in this region, yeah? And this is all to do with plate tectonics of, is it the African plate came up, hit the European plate, the Alpine orogeny, okay, and the ripples were sent out through the soil and the rock from the Alps, and that's folded all the deposits in this area. And that's why the beds are all at different angles, due to plate tectonics. And it's all linked into the earthquake. I don't know if anyone knows, there was an earthquake in Japan this morning. So this whole idea of plates around the earth, all moving about, folding and reshaping the soil and the rock was deposited.
Thanks, Steve. One last thing before we go for a lunch break. If you get lost, if you don't know where we are this afternoon, you see the stone pier going out from the beach, the stone pier, there's a road that goes up from the stone pier. If you go up that road, you will find the coach on the left-hand side. Go up there about half a mile. There's a coach park. It's on the left-hand side. The coach will leave probably about 3:30 to go back today. Okay. So if you get lost, get back there before 3:30. If you miss the coach completely, it's a bus. So one or two places. You take a bus from Swanage to Wareham, or you take a bus over to Bournemouth. Both places you can get the railway and then get back to Portsmouth that way. Don't want to leave anyone behind, but just in case it does happen, we'll meet you at the end of the promenade where the road disappears up the hill. It's 1:15, so 2:30.
What about the weighbridge? Should we do that?
Oh yeah, as you walk into town, try and see that you'll go down into town this way. See the Swanage Angling Centre. Have a look at the what's written in the stone at Swanage Angling Centre. It's a weighbridge. When they dug out the big blocks of limestone, took them into the town, they would have been weighed, and that's where they would have been classed for how much they were worth. Okay, so it's all been picked out and renovated recently. Have a look. So 2:30? Sound good? Yeah, at the end.